Welcome back. We are finally ready to talk about the static keyword. So methods need one of two things: an instantiated object or the static keyword. So here's our first example. Product equals new product. What this line of code does is it creates an instance of product in memory. So now there is one product object in memory. Because there is an instance of product in memory, we do not need the static keyword. So look at getDescription. GetDescription is not static. Java has an object, Java is happy, and so we don't need the keyword. So Java loves objects. It's the most object-oriented programming language that is widely used. So when there is an object, Java is happy. Here's our second example. Remember that print method we created several videos ago? It had to have the static keyword. Notice there is no object here, so Java is freaking out. It's got withdrawal symptoms from not having an object. The static keyword stops it from freaking out. So when there is no object in memory, Java is not happy. To make Java happy again, you must feed it the static keyword. Here's a poorly explained analogy. Java is addicted to objects, and if you send it to Alcoholics Anonymous, taking away its object, you also have to send it with its medicine, the static keyword, or it won't go. That being said, the static keyword does do a bit more. So if you want a pure method, like add two numbers, you can use the static keyword to ensure that you don't have an instance of the object. There is no state to manage and nothing to pass into the constructor, so there's no reason to have an instance. This can sound really confusing, so let me give you an example. Okay, so my objective is to just have a pure function. So before we did something like this. Static, integer, add, it takes in an int x and an int y. And it just returns x plus y. And then I can call it up here, add 1 and 2. So like we said earlier, because there is no object right here, you need the static keyword for it to work. If we remove this, notice we get a red squiggle, and Java is saying this is a non-static method, cannot be referenced from a static context. So again, that's really confusing. All it means is there is no object here to reference. So I'm going to add it back in. But now that we understand classes, this actually makes more sense to go in its own class, like a calculator object. So let's just do that real quick. I'm going to come up here. I'm going to right-click, New, Java class. I'm going to call it calculator. And then I'm going to go ahead and just copy this method and paste it in here. Now remember, we want this method to be accessible from outside the class, so the default access modifier is public, but I'm going to go ahead and specify, yes, this needs to be public. Now I'm going to go ahead and delete the static keyword so you can see what I'm trying to do. So when I go back to main.java, in order to reference this, I would have to say new calculator dot add, and then I add 1 and 2. Remember, by default, Java gives you a noargs constructor. That's right here. So even though we didn't specify it, it gave it to us automatically. Here's the problem though. I didn't pass in anything to the constructor, and I will never pass in anything to the constructor. The calculator class doesn't need anything. This is just a pure function. So I don't even want to call a constructor because there's never any state to manage. So what I'm going to do instead, I'm going to change this to static. Now when I come back over here, you can see the little warning it gives us. The static member add accessed via instance reference. What this is saying is you created a new instance, you're not supposed to have one. So I can simplify this code now. I can remove the new keyword, and I can remove the constructor. And now I have just a pure function that says, where is it? and then what function am I calling. So this is a lot cleaner, and it tells you that you don't need to manage any state. Now the static keyword doesn't just apply to methods, it can also be used for a constant, like the value pi. So you can reference it without creating a calculator object, and here's the key point. Pi belongs to the calculator. Every single calculator should have the exact same pi value. If you remember, when we instantiated products, every single product has a different name and a different description and a different price. But static is kind of like saying every single time you reference calculator, the value pi should be identical. So let's see that in action. I'm going to go back over to my calculator class, and I'm going to add in a static double. I'm going to call it pi. This gets all caps. This is convention. Is equal to 3.1415. And I can now do two things with pi. The first thing I can do is I can reference it outside the class. If I want to do that, it does need to be public. So when I come over back to main.java, if I just print out calculator.pi, I now have access to this pi value anywhere I go. The other thing I can do is, of course, I can create a method. So public static double calculate area circle, and it takes in a double radius. I can then reference the pi value up here. So I can return pi times radius times radius. And this will have the same value every single time I reference calculator. Okay, here's the official definition of static. Indicates that a particular member, like a variable or a method, belongs to the class itself rather than to instances of the class. So that's your hint. There's no instance of a class, that's why it's static. Again, pi belongs to the calculator, it doesn't change. Now that we understand public and static, let's revisit the main method. So the main method has to be public because the JVM starts outside the class, so it literally cannot run the main method unless it's accessible outside the class. So I challenge you, go change your main method to private and try to run it. You won't be able to. It also has to be static because before the program starts up, there are no objects in memory. There's nothing in memory. So you can't even run the main method yet. So you need to be able to run it even though there are no objects yet, and the way Java does that is it makes it static. So Java is so object-oriented that it literally can't even start running its own main method unless it takes its I don't have an object medicine and makes it static, which is kind of funny when you truly understand what's going on. Lastly, static is hard. It's one of the hardest keywords to fully understand in Java. So if you don't fully grasp it, it's okay. It takes time. IntelliJ will yell at you when you mess up, so that's kind of how people learn as they go. And as always, do the homework. Good luck.